Hello, in this lecture you'll learn how to use jobs in SQL Server. Now what a job is, it's basically this one query, or it could be several queries, which is called steps, and you will see all that. But it is basically that, and that can be scheduled on certain times of day, on certain intervals. So you will see how that works, but this is basically a sort of task scheduler directly on SQL Server, so you don't need to write any always running applications, you don't need to write any services, you already have that. Now, do note that on the free version, the SQL Server Express edition, you will not have this because you need this thing called SQL Server Agent. And SQL Server Agent is only available on the editions that are paid. So, moving forward, let's open that up. Let's expand the SQL Server Agent. Now, one thing to note here is that before you use it, you might need to actually start it. So to do that, you go to your tools, and as you can see, you have this SQL Server, we launched that before, and you also have the SQL Server Agent. So you need to have that running, and you should have it on automatic start mode. And let's get back. And as you can see, you have several things here. We won't get into them, but we will start with the jobs. And to create a new job, you need to right click on it and you go to the new job. You go to the new job, and now let's create some name for it. So let's say test job 1. We will see what happens, and as you can see, you can have some different categories. So we will just leave that at uncategorized. You can look into them later. And then you can go to steps. So these steps will be our little queries, and we will try to write just one simple step which will basically insert some data into our test table, where we have our text and decimal value in a row. So later we have schedules, which is quite important as well. So as you can see, you can have different schedules, so we will create them. And you also have alerts. We won't get into them now. And we also have notifications. As you can see, you can do email, page, and all that. We will get into some of these things in the later lectures. So now you also have targets, but it doesn't really matter here. You can see that you have target local servers, or you can target several servers. So let's get to the steps now. Let's get to the steps. And in the steps, we need to add new step. So remember, I said you can have several steps, and that is in fact true. So let's say STP1, our first step, and the only in this case. So as you can also see, you can have different commands. You can have different commands, different actually options to create commands rather. You can open it up as a file, so you can write your simple query, test it, and then kinda upload it as a step for a job. You can also choose the database for which you're going to be doing these jobs. So let's choose our test database 1, and we will do our insertion. Now let's take a look at what we need here. We have test database 1, and we have test table. And let's look at the columns. The columns are text test and deck test. So let's write our little query. You'll notice that this particular window text box does not have the IntelliSense, so that's why I did suggest doing this through a normal query, then testing it, and then either copying or simply creating a file and then putting a file in here. Also, what's useful in those cases, you can actually create a backup file, backup script file, and then upload it here so you schedule your backups automatically. So let's try that. Let's try inserting those values. So let's do insert into test table. Test table, I believe we have two T's. We have two T's. And here let's do some values. So let's do job one test. And then the number we could do 66, let's say. It doesn't really matter what we are going to insert. And let's do values. I actually made it the other way around, which is the wrong way. I need to do it like that. First you add, of course, the column names, and then according to those, the values. So let's do text test, and then dec test as well. So this should work. As you can see, it's a very basic, very simple query. And you have also, actually this is very interesting for some of you, we have Transact SQL, so our SQL, our SQL. And then you can also have operating system, so that's going to be CMD commands. And you can also have, probably the most interesting part of all, you can have PowerShell script, which can be quite useful in some cases if you have an environment where you are actually using PowerShell. And then you have some of these other ones, we won't get into them. And then you can do run as, we won't need that as well. So let's click OK, and we have our first step. And you also have on failure. You can have different options. So if you want to change that, you go to edit, you go to advanced. So as you can see, you have on failure. So you have quit the job, reporting failure. You can also go to the next step, and you can quit the job, reporting success if that fails. Obviously, we will most likely want to choose either the first option or the second one. And you can also have retry attempts, which is quite great if you really need for those tasks to actually succeed. And then you can also have retry interval in minutes, which is also a good thing to have. And then you have on success action as well. So it's very interesting stuff here, but we won't get into much into that. You know where to find it, and you can play around with it according to your needs. Also, you can log everything to table, and you can actually include step output in history. So that can be quite useful as well. Let's click OK. We have our first step, and now let's get to the schedule. So again, you can have as many steps you want, but we will only have one this time. So in the schedules, you click on new, and as you can see, you have lots and lots of options. So let's do test, share, let's do share, just like that. So you can have, first of all, the type, which is very important. You have start automatically when SQL Server agent starts. So this is useful for a case when your computer shuts down, if you need to try something or see if something hasn't been done whilst your server perhaps was in maintenance, or something like that happened where the SQL Server agent wasn't working, or anything else for that matter wasn't working. And then this also other interesting thing is start whenever the CPUs become idle. So this one can be quite useful if you have these high times on certain parts of the day or certain parts of the week, and if you have some time frames where your CPU is not being used at all, you might run those tasks then. But I usually would not recommend that. And also you have one time, so obviously that's gonna be one time at specific date and time. which isn't quite really interesting. It's not really that useful. What is very useful and what is the most popular option is the recurring. So as you can see, you might have frequency, and there are several frequency types. So these are the occurs, and you have daily, weekly, and monthly. So if you have monthly, you can also have some frequencies in the month. So let's take a look at that. And as you can see, you have first of every 1 month. So that is on specific day of every month. And you can have the first Monday of every month or month. So if you want every single month, or on say first Friday, you just do it like that, and you select one. For some reason there's some kind of an error perhaps in the user interface here. You can't see anything here, but that doesn't really matter to us. And then you can have daily frequency as well with that. But the most interesting thing is probably the daily thing, although weekly is kind of an interesting thing as well. It could be an interesting thing, but daily is probably the most useful because you can have recurs every day, every 1 day, or every 5 days it could be. But also you have daily frequency, so it recurs say every 3 days, and it recurs only once. But you could also have, say for example, occurs every hour, every 3 days. But what we are going to do, we are going to do every 1 days. So it's every day obviously, and it will be occurring now. And what we will try to do, we will try to do every 10 seconds. So let's do seconds. As you can see, you can have occurs every hours, minutes, or seconds. We need seconds, and it already offers us to have 10 seconds. So then you have the start date, the duration, and also you have the day start. So when it starts to occur, you might need to start with tasks at say 6 a.m. every day, and perhaps start at 8 a.m. and finish at 5 p.m. when the work starts and the work ends. So you might find many uses for this. This is very useful thing in the SQL Server. And then you have the start date, of course, so you don't have to start today, and you can also end it some day as well. But we will be starting today because obviously we need to see it now, how it works. So we do have our 10 seconds, we do have our start now, today, so we can click OK. And also you can see here that you have it enabled. You could, of course, disable it, and you could set up different schedules, and some you may disable, some you may enable according to your preferences and current needs. So now let's click OK. OK. And let's see what happens. Let's see if it actually starts. We will modify it if it doesn't work. So let's open our table, and let's do select top 1000 rows. So we will take a look at the number that will be displayed now, and then after say 10 seconds we will rerun that. So we have 32 records, and we will need to see if we can actually, if we are getting that. So let's try to rerun. It's almost 10 seconds. It's almost 10 seconds. We can try to rerun now. Let's see if we got anything, and we did not actually. So let's take a look. Let's take a look what might be wrong. So you can actually expand that, and I have test job 1. So let's see Let's see, where's my management? Well, actually, I need to manage it. The manage schedules, let's see. So we do not have any general. So let's open that up. And let's see, it is actually enabled. And we do have our steps, I believe. I do believe we have our steps. And so we might be experiencing a failure. And we will see if that is the case now. What we can also do, we can actually go to this step and copy this query and see if it doesn't return any errors. If it doesn't return any errors in a normal query like that. Let's see what happens. See, we have text test, and as you can see, we do actually have an error. So it's again, I mentioned this before, it is better to just write everything in these queries. So let's see, it's gonna be text test. Text it is. So it's text test, it should be, right? We have that. Let's try that again, and we did get one row affected. So let's fix the job now. Let's fix the job. Let's go to the steps. Let's modify the step. And we can paste that like that. And click OK. OK. And it should be fine now. So we will now wait 10 seconds. And before we, or rather while we wait, you can actually take a look at the error logs. So you have SQL Server Agent. And you have these error logs, so you double click on that and you get your errors. So as you can see, you have these several different errors which are actually related to the jobs. We won't get into them now. So let's see, we should have our result, or results rather. Our 10 seconds have passed. And as you can see, we already have several. It has been more than 10 seconds, it seems. We have job 1 test, and 66. So as you can see, now we have 37 records. And as you can see, I didn't do anything. I'll try to execute now again. And let's see how many do we get. We already have 39, so we spent probably about 10 to 20 seconds and we got our insertions. So as you can see, it is very useful to use these jobs. You don't need to create any services outside of SQL Server. You don't need any always running applications. You don't need to have any fancy Azure stuff. You just buy your SQL Server and you're good to go. And with that, we will conclude this lecture.